Folks, it's the Buckeye Blitz. I'm Tito, Jeff Fidoff. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is on FanStream Sports, powered by DSP Media. You can follow me on X, is what they're calling it now, at It Happens. Got a lot to get into today. We are 25 days until Ohio State takes on Indiana, 18 days to the start of the 2023 college football season. And first thing I want to get into is the college football coaches poll came out, and Georgia, no surprise, number one. They garnered 61 of the 66 possible first-place votes. Michigan was second in the rankings. Alabama third. They got 4 of the first-place votes that were available. And Ohio State fourth. They got the last remaining one. That's your top four right now. Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Ohio State, followed by LSU, Southern Cal, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, Tennessee. That rounds out the top 10. And then going further down the list, Washington is number 11, Texas 12, Notre Dame 13. Followed by Utah, Oregon, Texas Christian, Kansas State, Oregon State, Oklahoma, North Carolina, around the top 20. And then Wisconsin, Ole Miss, Tulane, Texas Tech, and Texas A&M make the top 25. Iowa just outside that number. They were the 26th team, so another Big Ten team in there. But you look at it, you got the teams on Ohio State schedule, Big Ten teams also. I mean, you got Wisconsin in there, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa just on the outside looking in. Future Big Ten schools, including Southern California and Washington on that list as well. Oregon in there also. So anyway, so that's the college football poll that came out. The coaches poll that was released on Monday, it would have been, I guess, on August 7th. And so I want to talk now about the realignment within college football and what's happened. So it came out last week. We already knew USC and UCLA were coming over to the Big Ten starting in the 2024 season. There was a long time for the Big Ten schedule makers, the Big Ten office, come out with the schedule for 2024, and they actually came out with one for 24 and then 25, what you could expect as far as the opponents for each team. They had these protected rivalries where Iowa had 3 of them, Penn State had 0, Ohio State just had the 1 with Michigan. And so they spent all this time putting this together for the 16-team Big Ten. It's going to come out in 2024. Now Oregon and Washington have joined the Big Ten for 2024 as well. So now you've got an 18-team conference. Still looks like no divisions. Looks like top 2 teams playing the championship. They have not figured out a schedule yet because this just came down on Friday. So you've got 4 schools out west with Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA joining in with the Big Ten. And now if you look at the geographically, the east to west where it goes, on the east when you got Rutgers and Maryland out there, and on the west with the 4 schools I just mentioned. So big time change in the way college football is doing things. In addition to all of that, on a secondary note, Colorado is bolting the Pac-12 at the time for the Big 12, and you got now Arizona State, and Utah also joining that in 2024, leaving 4 teams in the Pac-12 as of right now, the Pac-4, the 4-pack, whatever you want to call it, with Oregon State, Washington State, Stanford, and Cal. We'll see what happens to all of that. But college football is obviously undergoing a big change. And this is the last year. I mean, the Pac-12 is going to dissolve. There's no other way about it. And, there's still some schools that are scrambling. The media rights deals that are going on, that's what's making all of these things happen, because the Pac-12's commissioner, the media rights deal he presented included almost all streaming on Apple. And they could make $23 million a school to start off. Depending on how many subscriptions they got, it could be up closer to $50 million, which would put them in line with what like the Big 12 schools are getting. And Pac-12 teams were like, that's too much of a risk. So that's why Oregon and Washington got out. They come into the Big Ten not as a full revenue member yet. All their sports will be there, just like USC and UCLA will be in 2024. But they're coming in, they're not getting full shares of the media rights yet. And that, again, that's what's driving all of this, the money on these things. Florida State is a school that is wanting to get out of the ACC, it sounds like, unless the ACC bows down and gives them, they believe, and maybe rightfully so, that they deserve a bigger chunk of the revenue that's the media revenue that's brought in, because they think that they bring in, if their football program has more pull than, say, Virginia's does, in the ACC, more pull than the rest of the ACC. I think they should get a bigger percentage of that because of how much they bring to the table compared to some other schools in the ACC, like Syracuse, for instance, or something like that. It's a valid argument, but they also look at the fact that if things stay as they are, they'll probably make about $30 million less per year. Florida State will on the media deal than the Big Ten schools are making. So think about that. Northwestern will make $30 million more to pump into the athletic program than Florida State will. And when I say athletic program, I know a lot of it's football, but some of these schools, they fund other sports. Ohio State, certainly. The Buckeyes absolutely fund the football team, and men's basketball team fund so many sports that are on the that are part of Ohio State athletics. So Florida State's complaining about that. They're trying to get out of their deal with the ACC without having to pay a penalty. They're trying to find a way to do that. They've had lawyers working on this for a year. They want to have options where to go. SEC, I'm sure, would love to have them. There's been talk the Big Ten might go after Florida State. That would be interesting. But when you start getting to a 20-team conference, and Notre Dame's still waiting, they still say they can survive independent. I don't think it will last more than a few more years before Notre Dame will have to join a conference. But a 20-team conference would just be massive. And there are different things that happen in that. When the Big Ten was truly 10 teams, you could play a 9-game conference schedule and play everybody. And that would be at least fair for the most part, right? Because everyone plays the same schedule. Granted, sometimes home away, you don't know when injuries are going to hit. That'd be fair and equitable, and you determine your Big Ten champion that way. That's the way it used to be. Then when they go to the divisions, there's been a lot of years where Michigan and Penn State have been the second and third best team in the Big Ten, but because they're on the same side as Ohio State, they didn't get to go to the Big Ten championship. And the Western team would get to go. It's a much lesser team, which is why the East dominates and has dominated the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis every year in December. So it's inequitable there. And it's going to be further inequitable when you look at how they're going to do the schedule going forward. If they do have 18 teams, some teams might play an easier schedule than others. And a team like Ohio State, Michigan, USC, they may play a tougher schedule because there'll be more eyeballs on their games. And although, Ohio State, USC, Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin is going to draw more eyeballs than, Ohio State, Purdue, Ohio State, Indiana, Ohio State, Northwestern. It's just the way it is. And so the better teams, same thing with Michigan too. I'm not saying it's only for Ohio State, but the same thing happens there, where the better teams will probably have a tougher schedule than some of the weaker teams in the league. And so I like Ohio State gaining these 4 schools. I like Ohio State's, the conference, I should say, gaining these 4 schools because it makes for potential for better matchups. There's still going to be an inequity when it comes to the lesser teams in there. Ohio State's still going to win most of the time, if not all the time, against Indiana, Rutgers, Maryland. It's going to still have that. Same thing with Michigan. Same USC will run through those schools as well, depending on where they play those games. But it's still going to be there in that regard. Right now, like Ohio State this year, they've got 4 games on their schedule that to me are at least concerning. And that's more than there usually are on the Ohio State schedule. This year, you've got at Notre Dame, you've got at Wisconsin, you host Penn State, and at Michigan. That's 4 games right there where I'm not 100% convinced Ohio State's going to win those games easily or win them at all, a couple of those. In past years, you've had situations where there might be 2 games on the schedule you worry about with Ohio State. So I hope that these new teams coming in will add to that, and we'll see better matchups there. I'm also very much looking forward to seeing some of these West Coast teams have to play in conditions in November in some of these Midwest schools. The USC Notre Dame series is famous for the fact that whenever USC plays at Notre Dame, it's in October. In October because USC doesn't want to play in the cold and they don't want to have that game staged later in the season. When Notre Dame plays at USC in their annual game, that game, when it's in California, is later in the season, like November is when they play that game. That's where it's going to be played this year. So I want to see, I can't wait to see, like, if USC is at Ohio State in November or at Penn State, or if UCLA is, at Michigan in November or in Madison, something like that. I want to see how these teams from the West Coast react when they get into those kinds of games, because typically they don't have to play too many of those. But so Big Ten sitting now at 18 teams. They may go to 20. I think that if I'm the Big Ten, the smart play is going to be to stay at 18. Do not make a move yet. Wait and see what happens with Florida State. The ACC has reportedly has some interest in Stanford and Cal. That's fine. But if I'm the Big Ten, I wait for Notre Dame. And then when Notre Dame, if they ever come in or if they're ever on the brink of doing this, then add a 20th team at that point. But right now, there's not much need for it to push on to 20. There's not a lot of great schools out there that are readily available. Florida State would be fun. North Carolina would be fun to have them in. Duke maybe Pittsburgh just because of where they're at regionally. But I think they hold at 18 for now. But the college football, everything is now on the table as far as how you're going to do things with conferences, with rivalry games. Some rivalry games are going to go away. I mean, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, Bedlam, that's already talked about, the fact that Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State doesn't want to play necessarily Oklahoma anymore because they bolted for the SEC for 2024. You've also got, you're now losing Oregon State. You're losing Washington State. Those games are gone. And so in all likelihood, I'm saying, so there'll be situations now where college football traditions, college football rivalries, conference rivalries, all these things are on the table as far as for change, where it's going to go. And as a CFP, the college football playoff now goes up to 12 teams in 2024. This year, 2023, is your last year of college football as you've known it in recent memory, because this is the last year of the 14 playoff. This is the last year that the Pac-12 will exist. It's the final season of Oklahoma and Texas in the Big 12, and they're moving over, obviously, to the SEC. Those are all things that are going to happen no matter what. It's 2024 will be a 12-team playoff and a lot of other differences involved. So, again, follow me on the X. I am at It Happens, and this, again, has been the Buckeye Blitz on FanStream Sports, powered by DSP Media. Thanks so much for tuning in. Next one we're going to do is about recruiting. There's been some tough news for Ohio State. We'll give you an update on where things are with some players and what's happened in the last couple of weeks. We'll do that next on the next Buckeye Blitz. Again, thanks so much for tuning in.